Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasam. Welcome everybody to a day-long retreat. The topic of the day is heedfulness. In Pali, the word is appamada, and it shows up. It shows up in a number of places. The Buddha definitely talks much about it, and it's one of these words, one of these concepts that is slightly different from our more structured teachings, like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the four Iddhipada, the five faculties. We have these sort of lists and these concrete, things, and all the different variables work against each other. But the word appamada and the concept of heedfulness is something more basic, and it probably comes from an earlier time in the Buddhist teaching. So to recognize that before there were these lists, before there were sanghas full of hundreds of monastics to teach these lists too, there was the Buddha saying, be heedful. Yeah. And that was the instruction. And he was saying, don't be heedless. That was the instruction. And the people who were hearing him were like, okay, I'll do it. Yeah. And we can have that same relationship to this concept. So we can have the same relationship to the teaching. We have wonderful scaffolds of the Eightfold Path, where we can just go down and be like, is this right effort? Is this right mindfulness? Is this right livelihood? Am I doing this right? But with something like heedfulness, we have to let the idea kind of germinate and gather its own force. Basically, we have to build our own structure around it. And that's what we'll be doing today. So we take a concept that could be the seed of neurosis. I must be heedful. I must be heedful. I was heedless. I broke a dish. I spilled some food. I forgot a meeting. I was being heedless. This is terrible. This is going to lead to rebirth in the hell realms. Or it can be a support for our practice. Like we can build this structure around it, and we can see that there's this discernible difference. It's highlighting a quality of minds that we get as practitioners, and we get it by default. It's kind of hearing all of the systematic teachings. Heedfulness starts to develop. And so if we never just sit down and attend to this concept, it doesn't matter. It'll be there. But the Buddha talks about it anyway, because in some moments, a simpler, more basic idea is going to win the day. There'll be times when, just that simple on-off distinction, am I being heedful in this moment, or am I just being careless, will help us figure out a course of action or a way of applying our mind. So what are we dealing with? The important thing to say from the get-go is that pamada, or heedlessness, is not like a concrete thing that we do that we find ourselves doing and we have to be afraid of. It's not like, oh, I was being lazy, oh, I was being negligent, and that was something that we were doing. The first distinction to make is that pamada, heedlessness, is in fact the basic quality of most human beings, most beings in samsara. Okay? So before we ever heard the teaching, there was pamada. And even after we hear the teaching, sometimes there is pamada. Sometimes there is this sense of not being heedful. And this is one of the One of the funny things about the Pali language is that some of the most important concepts are simply a negation of an idea. Yeah. So you say, which is the idea? Is appamada the idea or is pamada the idea? Because appamada is simply pamada negative. Makes it negative. So not heedless. And heedlessness is basically living your life. It doesn't sound so bad, right? If there was not suffering and the way out of suffering, there would be no distinction. Yeah. If there was no way out of distinction, if there were no Four Noble Truths, if there was no Eightfold Path, if there was no gratification, danger, and escape, there would not be heedfulness. There would just be life, right? You would just be living your life. This is the first thing to know, is that heedfulness is something that develops in relationship to the path, and it only develops because there is a path. If there were no path, we couldn't be aware of it, develop this sort of attentiveness. So, and now kind of painting a scene or a picture to kind of describe what this change is, what this thing that arises that wasn't there before is. Even if you're really not into all of the teachings on rebirth, just you know setting a scene or a mental exercise, it's harmless, right? You're not you're not signing up for a religion, you're not joining a cult, just an idea. Imagine that you have a personality. You have likes, you have dislikes, you have things that you move towards very naturally, things that you feel about yourself or feel about others, and that all of these exist. The funny thing, though, is that these things keep existing and these things reinforce themselves. So imagine now that if you're plucked up from the life that you live now, yeah, and then somebody takes you across the country or across the world and drops you down in a different environment. You're suddenly, and you take on that environment. Suddenly you're born to a different family, you're living in a different country or region, you speak the local language, you eat the local food, but all of those same patterns will emerge. It's going to be in a different language, it's going to be around different objects, obviously, but you're going to start developing the same relationship. You're going to get in the same kind of arguments with the same kind of people. You're going to find yourself, looking in the shop window, wanting the same kind of thing. And it may be a hard transition. You may go from like looking in the shop window, really wanting like a new computer, to looking in the shop window really wanting a new cartwheel, for your horse cart. But the same kind of patterns will emerge. Yeah. And now wherever you got dropped, imagine that you get picked up again. And without this feeling of weirdness to it, it becomes quite natural. You get dropped somewhere else. Maybe if you were dropped in, the Middle East, or you were dropped in India, maybe you're dropped in Europe, or maybe you're dropped in Canada, or maybe you're dropped in Latin America. And you find that suddenly you're speaking Spanish, and you're wandering around, and it's warm and it's lovely. And the same thing happens. You start getting in the same kind of arguments. You start you make you take what you have on hand and you start making the same kind of house, the same kind of home. You start living in the same kind of place, such that if there was somebody in a spaceship like looking down at you then and the you before, if the two were put side by side, they would think it was hilarious. They'd be like, these people are it's obviously the same person, though they've done a costume change and they've learned a new language, but it's the same person because look, they're doing the same things. This is the reality of our situation. This is samsara. We have underlying tendencies, we have karmic patterns, we have a cache of tendencies that we call sankharas. We have made decisions about how we're going to act in certain situations, how we're going to respond to danger, how we're going to respond to opportunity, how we're going to respond to being slighted, how we're going to respond to being in love. We've made a bunch of decisions already, and we don't even know it. Like, we don't have like a record of it that we can just go and be like, oh yeah. So if somebody offers to buy your car, you're going to try to squeeze them and up the price. We don't know that we made that decision because it just gets filed in some weird kind of karmic way that it only activates in a certain scenario. And this is samsara. We don't even realize that we're carrying these tendencies because these tendencies are driven by what we were talking about last night, by craving. They arise, and the tendrils of craving just kind of snake out into all the available outlets, and it can only do it with available outlets. Like, if we have a lot of food craving, but we're living in a place where there's no food options, then we just sit in this kind of smoldering state of, just ready to daydream about food, but it doesn't activate because the conditions aren't there. But if we do find ourselves living in, France or Italy, where there's just delicious foods just in every window that as we walk down the street, and smells wafting, past us, we're going to live in absolute craving 24/7. Yeah, we'll wake up in the middle of the night thinking about baguettes, or delicious, coffees or this or that. Yeah. So this is what we are becoming heedful to. This is what we are waking up to, is the fact that this force of craving and this cachet of tendencies, likes and dislikes and patterns and memories and associations that cause our very consciousness to arise and seek out certain scenarios. All of this exists, and it's self-sufficient. Yeah, it can be picked up and dropped into any scenario, and it just runs. And this is what we see, and this is what the Buddha saw as he looked out into the world after waking up to the Four Noble Truths, after waking up to the reality of the situation in samsara. He saw that for limitless, beginningless time, this is what had been happening. He'd been getting picked up and dropped down in a new birth, and it didn't matter whether he was being born in a heavenly realm, or he was being born as an animal, or he was being born in hell, or he was in the human realm. It didn't matter if he was in the west or in the east or in the north or in the south, whether he was, a prince or a pauper, whether he was an ascetic or a criminal. He was getting dropped in these scenarios, and he was just running them. And there is absolutely nothing in samsara to counteract that. And it seems natural. And so we're all here, we're all contemplating this, probably for a reason. Probably somewhere deep down, there's a little niggling thought that says, I don't want to. That sounds like a bad deal. That sounds like that could go on forever. And that is wisdom starting to arise. Yes, it can and will go on forever. And as I said, this is the basic condition. This is the Buddha called, living beings. He said they're obsessed with becoming. And it's not like it would not be a harsh criticism if there wasn't awakening, right? It would just, what choice is there? Even the Buddha himself did not have a choice until he woke up to the way out. Yeah, so you can't really fault people for following these basic patterns. They're just trying to live the best life that they can. And to some degree, we do good things and we take care of the people around us and we try to uphold the precepts. We are, we're being smart. Yeah, you can actually try to live a better life and have better things happen to you. That's not being negligent. This is actually playing into the idea of like, well, okay, yeah, there is right and wrong, there is good and bad, there is pleasant and unpleasant. So why not cultivate pleasant? But then at another level, there is this awakening. So heedfulness is pointing to the fact that the moment we know that these tendencies will drive us from one existence to the next, to the next, to the next, and that without necessarily even realizing we're doing it again, we will do it again and again and again. The heedfulness is what arises to counteract. So last night I was also talking about how you have a state like craving, and it's this kind of this basic force, this smoldering like want, and it exists independent of the object. It's an inclination, and it'll find objects and move towards the objects, but it's more basic than that. Yeah, because it's going to keep coming up even if you get the object or the object gets destroyed. Still the craving comes back. But then there is the awareness that there is craving. And we call this appamada, we call this heedfulness, because craving cannot exist in this state of heedfulness. This is the opposite of craving, in the same way that we say that metta and anger are opposites, or envy and mudita are opposites. We say that like laziness and right effort, these are kind of opposites. You're either doing one or the other. The same way, you're either letting your patterns just run themselves, or you are aware that there are patterns. And that awareness that there are patterns, that there is craving, that there is samsara, that there is suffering, it's multifaceted, but it's not its opposite. It's not heedlessness. So we actually don't have to just look for one thing in this respect. Like heedfulness is talking about pretty much doing the whole path. It's kind of there whenever we have the knowledge that there is something that can be done. That's not to say that we can't attend to it specifically. We can't, want to build this quality itself. Because then again, in building this quality of heedfulness, if we attend to it, we are counteracting the very core reason that we suffer in a basic way, the distinction between physical and mental suffering. We counteract that. We can go through physical suffering and not make a big deal out of it. It's like, this is okay, yeah, that's what happens. We can experience a loss and not make a big deal out of it, but also counteract the very reason that we get dropped in a new situation and we keep running with the same patterns. Once we start to know that is the format, we start losing. It gets old. It gets old really fast. We start saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be on autopilot. And it might sound like, I don't want to be on autopilot, but no, that's a noble gripe. Yeah. And the Buddha did talk about, like these unpleasant states that are beneficial. And that's one of the things where somebody says, oh, my mind is running wild. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to have the freedom of samadhi and the bliss of liberation? And the Buddha said that is, yeah, it's not pleasant, but it is a wholesome state, because you're not sitting there being, oh, if only I had the newest device, I would be happy. That would be what everybody else does. That would be being on autopilot, because it's a belief that the newest device is going to fix the problem. But when we sit there and know, we watch the craving keep trying to solve our problems by getting something in the world, and we say, that's not going to do it. That's not going to do it. You know what, craving? You are the problem in the world. And if you were not here, the world would just be okay. That knowledge and awareness is it's the antidote. Yeah, because that it means whenever we are aware of craving, we're not buying into it, that we are not watering it. And then again, we are talking about craving as like a weed. It gets stronger when we let it do its thing. When we let the mind keep going back to the objects of our craving and keep telling itself that these are great, these are good, these are going to fix our problems. If we do anything to slow that down or counteract that, craving will diminish, it will run out. It's like an ember. It needs to hold its heat. If it's put down into something that's wet or cold, it's going to start to go out. The same with our craving. It only exists because we're never counterbalancing it. And so our mindfulness, our right efforts, our contemplation of the Dhamma, our hanging out with good, noble people is in fact counterbalancing our craving. Even if we're not the ones who are really good at not lunging at every new thing, if we're hanging around with somebody that we value and respect, and they're not filled with craving, they're not lunging after each new thing, it will slow us down. And our craving will start to unravel, start to diminish. All of the things that we do in the past are going to develop this heedfulness. But at the same time, we have this opportunity to kind of look at it itself and to put ourselves in this scenario. And I say, just, even if we're on the fence about something like rebirth, you can just frame this in terms of your very life. Because, in fact, this is happening every day, right? When you wake up in the morning, or if you work the night shifts, and you wake up in the, in the early evening to go to work, when you wake up, you kind of don't exist. Yeah. And your eyes kind of flutter open, and you're kind of like, okay, what do I do? I seem to be wearing clothes, but the wrong ones. Like, oh, I gotta get dressed. My mouth feels weird. Maybe I should brush my teeth. I'm a little hungry, or maybe I need a cup of coffee, or gradually things start to arise. Yeah, what is the driving force for those things that arise? Now, you can live without craving, so it couldn't just be a basic response to what's there. It's like, oh, I'm wearing my pajamas. I guess I should put on real clothes. And then you look and it's like, yeah, I'm a little hungry. Maybe I'll eat something. But you don't have to wake up and be like, oh, I gotta seize the day. I gotta go out there. It's a great day to go skiing. I gotta plant something in the yard. I've got to do this. I got to do that, and the whole checklist of things starts. And that's craving, yeah. And that's going to squeeze our day. It's going to compress our time. It's gonna make everything a struggle, yeah. But this is what we see every single day. So it's not even a matter of rebirth. If we were to solve the problem of craving, maybe the rest of our day would still kind of play out the same way. We'd still have that checklist of things, but maybe, just maybe, we would wake up tomorrow morning and we'd get up and we just kind of look out the window and we hear the birds and then be like, I think I'll have some eggs. And we go and make breakfast, and then we're eating breakfast, and we're like, yeah, today would be a really good day to pull those weeds in the garden. And then we go out and we mindfully pull the weeds. And this is like we were talking about, last night with craving. It's like that's actually the definition of somebody who's done. And if you see just a regular person, doing that, you'd be like, is that all you're doing with your life? But if you know that there is this path out of suffering, and that it involves relinquishing craving and developing a livelihood that is free of craving, then with that knowledge, you could see that person's doing it. Yeah. They are leading their life and they're not being led through their life. They're just one step after the next, after the next. And it's actually the most receptive state to be in. They can learn, they can respond to everything as it's arising, because nothing's pre-programmed anymore. Everything is like, okay, there's this, it feels this way. Maybe I'll do this. There's this. I'll do this. Maybe now we can get comfortable, or I'll lead a bit of a guided meditation. I'll get it started, and we'll see where it goes. Yeah, but it's also, again, as I approach meditation, um, I rarely I rarely waste the opportunity to think on important themes. Yeah. So you may find that you are moving in and out of doing a samadhi practice and then going and thinking about it. Like, what was I doing again? Oh, heedfulness. Yeah. And that's kind of what should happen. Yeah. You have this day, and because I keep saying this word over and over and over, I'm just trying to plant this seed that you're going to focus on your breath for a little while. You're going to get really calm. Then you're going to get out to do walking, and you're going to be out walking, and you're going to be thinking, I should just be peaceful. And then something will flutter up, and it's like, oh yeah, maybe I should be heedful. And then maybe something in your mind will be like, well, what's the difference? It's for you to figure out. I could tell you over and over and over again, but you will find it out on the walking path. You will find it when you're washing the dishes. You will find it, as you're getting ready for a sit in the afternoon and you're starting to doze a little bit. You will start to stumble upon your own definition of what this is, such that you will be able to carry it with you. And the way that you've been carrying all of your tendencies with you all of this time, you'll start to carry the knowledge that you personally have found, that, oh, that's what it looks like, that's what it feels like, that's what I'm aiming for. So you know when it's not there. And when it's not there, anything could happen. But when it is there, you know that you're watching, you're processing. Right. So again, start and a little bit of talking, some new thoughts to sprinkle in there, some new ideas. Again, new ideas can generate craving. Let things settle for a minute. Returning our attention to the flow of time. What do we hear around us? And just let go of anticipation. And just hear. Don't even have to label. Just hear what's going on. Letting the sounds go, letting one moment flow easily into the next. You might find that as we're listening, a sense of the listener starts to float into our awareness. A sense of our body, sensations, without even looking for them, without even attending to them. I'm kind of aware that we're breathing. or sitting. Hands, like the sounds around us. Sensations in our body, whether pleasant or painful, the two are just like the sounds. They're really usually just there for a moment, and something else happens, and then something else happens. And we not label them, not anticipate them. Experience the flow of sensations across our body as though we were being draped with a cloth or washed with cool water. Feel as a sensation trickles down across our skin or ripples through a muscle. Not needing to respond to it, not needing to make anything of it. Now in this calm and receptive state, this observant state that we're trying to develop, just adding just one thought, just one idea, that we are prone to craving. That when we feel a sensation that feels good, we might have a tendency to be like, oh, is this jhana? Am I doing it? Am I getting it? Is this enlightenment? Let's get more of that. Can we feel that? It's an idea most of the time, usually only revealing itself when there's a pleasant sensation. This awareness help us relate whatever's pleasant in the body. And the reality is, somewhere and probably many places in our body, things are okay. Maybe even good. Maybe there's a cool breeze or a warm sweater. Blood flowing into our limbs and energizing them. The happiness of a good meal that we've eaten. The tingling energy of a caffeinated beverage that we drank. Can we know that there's good in the body without looking for it, without clinging to it, without expecting it? And this is the essence of the rapidly disappearing art of relaxing. Knowing that there are pleasant sensations in the body all the time. And if we just let them be, they flow through us. We are prone to aversion, those painful feelings. Something aches, you feel a twinge, sudden jerk of a muscle, sharp pain in an organ, we don't even know what, an itch, feel too warm, feel too cold. Maybe we feel a little indigestion, start blaming our meal choices. We are prone to try to label, try to find the source of, try to eradicate unpleasant feelings. Just knowing that this is our tendency. Does that help? Can we abide knowing that we will at some point feel something unpleasant? And even with this knowledge, can we keep relaxing such that when the pain does come up, we laugh at it? You are just pain. And I know that I've been led from existence to existence trying to get away from you. But I didn't have to go anywhere because you already arise and cease. I was not born with you. You've not been there all along. And you will not be there in the future. We are prone to craving to ignore neutral sensations. Maybe all around us there are many noises. Maybe we're fortunate enough to have birds or crickets, chipmunks chirping, wind through the trees. Maybe some of these sounds are interesting. Maybe there's traffic or honking, or neighbors dropping something loudly or starting a lawnmower. Sensations we are likely to recoil from. But if we were to sit here and say, I am awash in the simple and surrounded by the ordinary, can we find a happiness in the ordinary? Can we sense the way our mind wants to focus on the interesting, wants to cringe at the unpleasant? Can we watch that as it happens, and in every moment where we catch it, only reminding ourselves there are noises, there are sensations that just are. what in our environment is just happening. The background hum, simple and repetitive, with the feeling of our skin, our body pressing against our seat, feeling of the tip of our nose. Not good or bad, just there. And maybe this feels like patience, this awareness. Maybe it feels like watchfulness or wakefulness. Like we've stepped out of flow of the world. We're no longer a participant, but an observer. When we see these tendencies arise, we know it. When we're not seeing them arise, we're patient. We wait and see, knowing what craving moves towards. We've never had this experience, maybe only intuited it. What would it be like to just sit here, being aware that there is craving, but not giving into it? Letting go of all the doing, letting go of all the becoming, just waiting and watching, being ready. What do we feel about that idea? How do we feel about that state? And we can be honest with ourselves and listen to the answer. Try to see what reasons our mind might put forth for or against that state. Could we really just abide, just experience, just observe? Could we really just let craving run out? whatever thoughts come to join us in this space of awareness, pleasant, painful, or neutral thoughts. Can we relate to them simply in these terms? Rather than following or building on them, can we say this is a pleasant thought, this is an unpleasant thought, this is a normal thought. What happens when we let go in this way? Can we see when we find ourselves craving for something more and let it go? We notice when we're grieving over something, know that it's unpleasant and let it go. Is it possible to be relaxed and aware at the same time? So we'll now move into an open period. You can do walking meditation. Traditionally, this is done simply by marking a path. It's maybe 25 or 30 paces and just walking back and forth. Or you could go on a linear walk, knowing, to circle back, walk in a circle, I guess. But also, if walking's not that great, you could stand or you could sit somewhere comfortably. Um, use the time as you will, but this can be a time where you can be a little bit active, but try to maintain the mindfulness, because it's really what walking meditation is. It's practicing mindfulness, heedfulness in motion. So the question I'll see the rest of the morning with is, does this experience of heedfulness feel different? Does it sort of feel like when you're being heedful, you're not a person? It's like the normal you doesn't exist. Like if I'm watching my cravings, then who am I? And to look at that feeling, look at that thought. What am I like when I'm not giving into craving? And am I not a thing, or am I just something different? And the other one is that a problem? Does that have to be a problem? Is there any reason that I have to be part of the world, driven by craving, obsessed with becoming? Is there a reason I shouldn't be free of craving, relaxed, watching things come and go? The Buddha, famously was a prince who was sheltered from aging, sickness, and death. And but eventually, though maybe we're not quite sure, but maybe in his late 20s or 30s, which is this is hard to believe, he stumbled across aging and sickness and death. How he talked about it later is that there was already such a basis of heedfulness waiting to arise within him, that the moment he found out that people get old and their faculties break down, he said, the intoxication with the youth left me and never returned. Imagine that as you go about the next hour and a half, anytime that comes up, I wish I was strong again. I wish I could, yeah, just go on a long hike, or, I wish I didn't have this pain, or, yes, this is great. I should do this all the time. This is good for my health. Anytime that comes up, and you can kind of feel a little bit of craving, can you unpack that? And you say, oh, what would it be like to not have that? Just be like, this is my body right now, well, for good or for ill. Speaking of illness, the Buddha said when he encountered the reality that people get sick and they don't really have much control over it, he said the intoxication with health and vigor left him and never returned. Now we're imagining he became someone different. And how would people have related to him, right? They would have come out, they would, Siddhartha, Siddhartha, snap out of it. You were so fun before. Now you're such a stick in the mud. But look at what became of him. He experienced true happiness, lasting happiness, true peace, in a paragon of the community, the master of his destiny, because he let go of that state. Can we let go of that state? Do we have to be obsessed with health? Or can we be a happy sick person? And if we're happy, does sickness really exist? The Buddha said when he encountered the reality that people die, the intoxication with life left him and never returned. And again, that's a sort of riddle. Like, how do you live without being obsessed with living? How do you not worry about where am I going to, what house am I going to be in? How am I going to get from place to place? Where am I going to sleep? What kind of food am I going to have? Who am I going to be? Whenever, over the course of the day, we find ourselves being like, what am I making of my life? Ask yourself, is it not making itself? Is that not something you figure out in hindsight? You have you ever been able to anticipate what's just around the corner? I haven't. I'm endlessly shocked. I wake up every morning and I'm like, so now I'm here, huh? Is that does that have to be a problem? So these are the questions we carry with us, and this is helping us kind of circle in on the state of what it would be to just be aware of what's going on, what we're working with. Yeah. Okay, so we will let's do 45 minutes of walking, and then we'll come back together, and it seems like we'll do 45 then of sitting together. Okay, so see you at 11 Eastern Daylight Time.